Feel absolutely free to stop me if you've heard this one before. In an Eastern European village, a local mob forms and executes a witch for witchcraft. And she dies. Decades later, whatever. Who cares? She Beast was made in 1966 by director Michael Reeves. Now, Michael Reeves is an interesting case because he's also responsible for Witchfinder General, a film with Vincent Price, and The Sorcerers with Boris Karloff. He's also rumored to have helped complete Castle of the Living Dead. On the official credits, he's only listed as an assistant director. So how does an artist who worked with Christopher Lee, Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, and Barbara Steele make a film as bad as She Beast? Well, the first thing is, it feels like for years I was on the outside of a joke. And it's a joke that continues to this day. Google She Beast. See what comes up. You won't see one word used very often, but it's the key to understanding what this movie is. Comedy. It is unsuccessful in every way. It's not scary, it's not funny, although it tries desperately to be funny. But perhaps the most disturbing thing about She Beast is that you show up for Barbara Steele. At least, if you're smart, you show up for Barbara Steele. But it weaponizes that against you, because Barbara Steele disappears a half hour into this film, only to reappear in the final moments. She only filmed one day on this production, and it shows. That said, as usual, she steals every scene, and not by a little bit. In fact, I'd say she's the only good performance in this film, but she's stellar. She also cuts an impressive figure in the film, coming off like a more satirical and cynical Jackie O. It doesn't help the film. Steele plays a newlywed bride, traveling across the countryside with her husband. At no point does she feel like she belongs in this movie, and seems to be doing her own thing. But of course, since there's only about 10 minutes of the film that she's actually in, if Barbara Steele fans have any soft spot for this movie, it's because of the bedroom sequence that she's involved with its sensuality and near nudity. But the movie never capitalizes on having her, because it can't. She's just not there. After a bad night spent in a town with its Van Helsing, yes, that Van Helsing, Barbara Steele and her husband drive cross-country and get into a car accident. At that point, she leaves the film. The rest of the film is spent trying to resurrect her character by exorcising the witch who's taken possession of her body, which of course is really the witch's body. It doesn't look a thing like Barbara Steele, because it can't look like Barbara Steele, because again, she's absent. The most shocking thing about this film is it's not just a failure in the horror department. It never has any tension, it never has any suspense, and zero shock. Where it really fails, though, is in the comedy. It is broad British comedy in the sense of the 1960s. But I don't mean that in a good way. And if you're a fan of Monty Python or Fawlty Towers, you might be tempted to take a chance on this movie. Don't. It's substandard in every way. None of the jokes work. It's the kind of film where just referencing Dracula is meant to be a joke. No punchline, just a reference. It's also the kind of film that thinks cockfighting, rape, and ethno-stereotypes are funny. And to be honest with you, if there was actual jokes, maybe it would be. Probably not. That's a pretty high bar. But here, none of it works. None of it's funny. There are a few scenes in this that are staged well. In fact, if you don't see how the opening sequence of the witch being tortured and killed reflects Lucio Fulci's opening to The Beyond, you probably haven't watched The Beyond quite enough. Now, don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as good as Fulci's film, even in its highest moments. But you can see where Fulci was inspired by this film. Now, Reeves would go on to make such better films that this thing is really a curiosity. How did it turn out so badly? And if it didn't have Barbara Steele, would anyone even know that this film existed today? Would it even be available today? The answer is maybe, I don't know. It probably shouldn't be available now, because outside of Steele, there's nothing here to offer. It's an ugly, uninspired mess that thinks it's funny. When you were growing up, did you have that kid in school that thought shooting mashed potatoes out of his mouth because he saw Jim Belushi do it was funny? It wasn't funny, right? It wasn't gross either, really. It was just kind of dumb. That's She Beast. I've spent this series trying to interest you in Barbara Steele's lesser-known work. And before it's over, we'll get to her better-known works. But this isn't one of them. Consider this a warning. This should be the very last Barbara Steele film that you seek out. Now, for those of you out there who are the contrarians, who think, well, there must be something to this movie. Okay, go for it. And let me know in the comments what you like about this movie. And if that comment reads, well, Barbara Steele's good in it, well, I think we've got that covered. You can watch a lot better films with a lot more Barbara Steele in them than this film. In fact, I'd rather watch any of the other films a dozen times than this one again.